Welcome back, folks. My name's Shane. In today's video, I'm going to share with you my long-term 6-month review of the Panasonic LUMIX G9 Mark II. This is one of the new generation of micro four third sensor cameras from Panasonic, and it gives us all the great features that we've come to expect now from the LUMIX brand. We get brand new autofocus, improved dynamic range, excellent image stabilization. It's a great photography camera, and if you're a video shooter or content creator, the G9 Mark II is an absolute beast. Now, it does have a few limitations, which we'll talk about throughout this video, but overall this camera is really impressive. Before we get into this video, just know it's not sponsored. I paid full price for the G9 Mark II at the start of 2024, and if you've been subscribed for a while now, you know I've done a few videos on this already, including a deep dive tutorial guide. And if you want to learn more about how this camera operates, I'll link down to that in the description box below. Today's video will focus mostly on the functionality and performance of this camera over the last 6 months. Now, just to give you a quick backstory here, I actually shot part of this video the other day and it was raining and miserable, so I decided to reshoot this here at the beautiful little fishing town here of Tooradin in Victoria, Australia. I grew up not too far from here, and it's a great little town. There's a beach over here, there's a big waterway right here, plenty of different parks and all that kind of stuff around here, and hopefully some wildlife. So we'll see if we can get some photos with this thing as well as we go. But if you enjoyed the video, please leave a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and click the bell, all that kind of good stuff. And let's get into this video. Here we go. Now, if you're looking to get into photography and with micro four thirds, the G9 Mark II is the way to go. It's nice and small and compact, unlike the GH7, which has active cooling and a flip around and out screen. This is a lot lighter. So if you're looking for something small, light and compact for travel or just for general photography purposes, this is a really great choice. Now, I love the fact we get the new Leica monochrome picture profile, which allows us to get a really great black and white look. And this is the only other camera than the GH7 with this particular profile at the time of shooting, which is fantastic. Now, another thing to love about this camera when it comes to photography is the handheld high resolution mode, which allows you to get an almost 100 megapixel image just by selecting the dial in this position here. And this allows you to capture a really wonderful image. Then you can go in and crop in post. Now, this is full handheld. You don't have to have it on a tripod. It's all compiled in camera. It only takes a few seconds and you get some really great results. Now, whether you're shooting photography or video, the dynamic range on the G9 Mark II is great. We get the brand new DR boost, which works basically in all steps of the ISO range, as opposed to the older GH6, which basically ramped your ISO all the way up to 2000 when shooting vlog. Now we can shoot the base at 640 and get as much dynamic range and a much cleaner image overall. When it comes to shooting in vlog, you get plenty of latitude. So if you want to match this to, say, an S5 Mark II or a GH6 or GH7, you can absolutely do this. I kind of feel like the G9 Mark II now is kind of like the little video brother B cam to that of the GH7. Now let's talk about the autofocus performance on the G9 Mark II, because this gives us so many new modes that weren't found on any of the prior micro four thirds cameras or even their full frame range. But the S5 Mark II and X did get the same capabilities as this thanks to the latest firmware update. But this allows you to track people, animals, cars and motorcycles, and a little yellow box will show up and it works beautifully. Whether you're shooting photos or video, someone can be really far back in the frame and it has no problems tracking them whatsoever. It can get a little confused sometimes if there's more than one person in the scene, but you can just simply tap on the box that you want to track and that's it. And I find the autofocus on the new LUMIX system far more reliable at a distance than even my Sony cameras. Now, the Sonys might have an advantage in other ways when it comes to the way it pulls focus, but I find the autofocus reliability, especially if I talk to camera pieces like this, really solid. And I'm using my S5 Mark II X right now, and I'm sure it's going to be fine. Another thing I really love about the G9 Mark II is that it's breathed new life into older lenses. This is the Panasonic LUMIX 42.5mm f1.7 that was completely unusable on my GH6 when it came to video. But now I have full face and body tracking and it works a treat. The new autofocus system responds so much better with the old lenses than any of the other prior cameras, with the exception now, of course, of the GH7. So if you're looking for great autofocus and you've got a whole bunch of older LUMIX lenses, it's going to work way better than it ever did before. Now, if you're someone who wants to vlog or do any type of handheld video work, the G9 Mark II gives you some of the best in-body image stabilization you're going to find on any camera system. And guess what? This is all straight out of camera with minimal crops. This is the new stabilization system set to high. I'm shooting with the 9mm f1.7 at 1.7, so I'm still getting some background blur here. We've got the camera set to auto, shooting in open gate, and we're currently in vlog, so I'll be grading this after the fact. Now I'm tipping this looks pretty awesome. I've used this camera so much handheld, and if you're doing any type of vlogging, I would go for the G9 Mark II over the GH7 because it's actually lighter and smaller, and that's a good thing when you want to vlog, and the IBIS is identical. So you're getting the same sort of performance, and the G9 Mark II is actually cheaper. Check out this guy over here. Too many seagulls have been sitting on him. Anyway, let's talk about using the G9 Mark II now as a B camera to the GH7 or even the S5 Mark II or X. So if you've got one of the full frame cameras, the G9 Mark II is a great complementary camera because we get 4K at 120 frames per second, which is something we don't get on the S5 Mark II or X. So it's a better slow motion camera, especially if you're going to be shooting outside. The image quality is going to look exceptional. Now, when it comes down to low light, obviously the G9 Mark II won't compare with the full frame system, but the low light performance on Micro Four Thirds now is better than it's ever been, and it can be usable up to about ISO 4000. So if you're happy with that, I think you'll get a kick out of this camera. Now, if you're thinking about getting a GH7 and you're already an owner of a G9 Mark II, these two cameras complement each other beautifully. They have the same lens mount and basically 99% of the same features minus internal RAW recording. So if you don't need that and you're looking for a great B camera to a GH7, the G9 Mark II is by far the best option. The G9 Mark II is arguably one of my favorite camera designs of all time. It's very comfortable in the hand. It's essentially the same as the S5 Mark II and X, giving you a very prominent grip. It's actually way more prominent than that of something like a GH5 or GH5 Mark II. So if you're coming from one of those two cameras, I think you'll get a kick out of this grip. It's just way better to hold, especially when shooting handheld. If you're going to be doing that for a long period of time, the grip on this is far more comfortable. We get matching SD card slots on this camera as well. There's no CF Express card slot, so you're going to save a few bucks there when it comes to backing up on the fly if you need to shoot a wedding or you're going to be doing something where you need a sense of redundancy. I actually really like this even more than the GH7. Let's talk about overheating. Now, the G9 Mark II is a pretty robust camera when it comes to not overheating, but people have had different results with this camera depending on their shooting scenario. Now, I've shot with this at 40 degrees Celsius in Perth in Western Australia, but it was actually overcast, but it was stinking hot. It was one of the hottest days I've had in years, and it never overheated. I did see the warning message. I changed the temperature threshold setting from standard to high, and it never overheated once, and that was awesome. Then I got back to Melbourne, Australia, where it was much cooler. It was about 28 to 29 degrees Celsius, but I had it in direct sunlight, and the sun was hitting the back of the camera, and it eventually overheated. Now, I've used this in the studio, and I've shot with it for hours and hours and hours at 4K or even 5.7K at 50, 60 frames per second, and it's never overheated. So it really depends on your shooting scenario. The only mode I could get this to overheat in the studio was 4K at 120 frames per second. So if you're going to be shooting in any of the other modes, including open gate, you can let this thing run all day. Let's wrap this video up. I'm gonna give you my final thoughts on the G9 Mark II. So this camera has been super reliable, minus the one time it overheated on me. I've shot so many of my shows on this channel and my other channel with this camera. It's my main B-roll camera anytime I'm outside. The phase detection autofocus and the S&Q option, 4K at 120 frames per second, all looks beautiful, and it's breathed new life into my older Micro Four Thirds lenses that were almost unusable when it came to DFD. Even on the GH6, you know, there's some lenses that just didn't perform well when it came to autofocus. Some performed okay on the GH6, but the G9 Mark II makes so much sense if you're a hybrid shooter, whether you're a photographer or videographer looking for the best autofocus in Micro Four Thirds. This or the GH7 are now the way to go, and it's not even close. Now, if you're someone who's shooting weddings or corporate events and you never want to think about overheating in any scenario, then get the GH7, especially if you're thinking about Micro Four Thirds. The S5 Mark II and X are also bulletproof when it comes to overheating. I've never once even seen a warning on either of those two cameras, and you can shoot 4K at 120 frames per second, S&Q or in the variable frame rate mode, and they'll never overheat. So yeah, this is a big advantage to active cooling. But if you're just going to be using slow motion occasionally and you'll be shooting stuff like this, or you're going to be doing a lot of stop-start stuff, the G9 Mark II will actually save you a whole bunch of money. So I think this is a really great camera. And when I knew the GH7 was coming out, I did feel a little bit of buyer's remorse, but then I got thinking, like, what am I buying into with the GH7 over a G9 Mark II? And the answer there is only the active cooling. That's the only feature that really makes that more appealing to me, as I do shoot a lot outside. But my S5 Mark II X is my main outside camera, and the reason why is it's got active cooling. But this is my main B camera, and the reason why? It's got the best functionality out of all of my cameras currently. And if I owned a GH7, I'd probably still use it as a B camera in most scenarios to my S5 Mark II X, because the image quality out of that camera just looks beautiful in the standard frame rate modes, but the full frame stuff starts to suffer when you want to use some of the higher frame rates. You get additional crops and so forth. But the GH7 is an absolute killer camera, but the G9 Mark II gives me almost all of the same great functionality and image quality. So I have no complaints with this camera, minus the fact I have got it to overheat once, but that was it. So it's been awesome. Let us know what you think. Thanks again for watching. My name's Shane, and I will catch you on the next one. See ya.